Season 1, Episode 3. One week later.
It's a nice night.
It's a nice, pleasant,
November
cold, damp evening 19th, here in Waterloo.
7:36 and 57 seconds. And guess what tonight is?
It's podcast night, baby.
Wow, I was going to say Carmelo Anthony is in the league.
Oh, very true. Yeah,
and he's kicking it off tonight.
It's also podcast night.
It is podcast night, and they go together because now we get to talk about Carmelo Anthony on podcast night.
Exactly. Almost a year out of the league, bouncing around, signing contracts, having them fall through, being released. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, you know what? It was kind of a sigh of relief for Carmelo Anthony fans everywhere. Last week when he announced that he was signing a
walk us through his journey.
Non-guaranteed deal, right? So obviously Carmelo Anthony, absolute legend for Denver and the Knicks, and has been averaging north of 20 points since 2003, and then 2017, 2018 OKC. He averages 16.2, plays 78 games. Not a bad season, but people are starting to say, okay, he's getting a little bit old because that was a 6-point per game decrease. Then he bounces over to Houston in 2018-2019, averages 13.4, has a couple rough outings here and there, plays 10 games, gets released. That was last November. Hasn't played a game of basketball since then. There's been all sorts of hype about whether he's good enough to still play in the league. All of his friends, such as LeBron James and Dwayne Wade and all those big names, were like, let him get into the league. And apparently, Damian Lillard also wanted him in the league because he supported him, and now he's playing with him in the Portland Trailblazers. The question is, though, is it gonna have like a 10-game stand like he did for Houston, or do you think he could he could kind of get back on track for the latter part of his career, Luke? What do you think?
Yeah, I think for someone like that, obviously he has a very good early start to his career, and he proved that wasn't just a one-off.
No, legend.
1 or 2 seasons, he's a talent. It doesn't come by every day. I think that Houston was a little tough on him, to be honest. He didn't. Right. Small sample size. Everyone has rough starts this season. We saw that this year.
It wasn't awful. It was 13.4.
No.
That's not great, but it's 10 games in with a new team.
Exactly, and you're trying to adapt to their style of play.
Right.
Every team in the NBA plays a lot different. You see, especially with Houston, you'll have teams guard James Harden by standing behind him.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, that's a fish out of water for someone who's new.
And the year before, he was obviously playing with Russell Westbrook, who's a different type of player. And now we see them on the same team, so that's interesting.
Yeah.
But,
game tonight against the Pelicans.
He's starting. He'll play probably around 20 minutes.
Should play a good amount, especially that team's hasn't done too much this year. A very young team.
Super sad the start they've had, and now they're getting decimated by injuries. Damian Lillard's not playing because of back spasms. And CJ McCollum's been inconsistent as well as Damian together. And then Zach Collins is out for at least 4 months. Nurkic and Gasol are both sidelined indefinitely. So it's just like, wow. So Carmelo Anthony's going to slot in there at power forward. And I feel like if there is a chance for him to get his career back on track in his older age that he is, I guess, now, this would be a good chance. Whereas he's not joining James Harden and a Houston team that is seriously contending, but he's joining a Portland team that should be contending, but because of injuries and because of a slow start, they're not. If he's like the type of guy who can get them out of that rut, he could get back on track there, especially with all these injuries, right?
100%, and I think definitely his experience, the way he carries himself in the league, and the way he's comfortable playing at this level. He's played here for years. I think it'll just be a couple games to get back into the swing of things. If he can have a good sort of debut after his time off, if you will, I think that I think he still has what it takes. I think there's a lot of potential there, but obviously it's a fast-paced game, and we see that.
Yeah.
He
passed his fitness test. He passed the physical, so that's good.
Yeah, and obviously he hasn't just not been playing basketball. Every player on there not playing their sport. They're always still playing.
Yeah, it's still gonna be this IQ of the game, and everything is gonna be perfectly fine. It's just a matter of whether his body can still move on a nightly basis the way it used to. And you know what, with what the Trailblazers have been doing in the with Mario Hezonja and Nasir Little and Anthony Tolliver at power forward, that trio was pretty ineffective. So now we get the old man who hasn't seen action since November of last year, I'm excited for him. We'll see. It's not guaranteed. He's got to still be on the roster by January to get the money, the $2 million.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's got to still be on the roster. It's not guaranteed, but I'm hoping that he has a good start.
You always want to see a legend of a sport. You want to see them playing, especially if they want to be playing.
And he's been wanting to play, and everybody's been behind him. So good on the Trailblazers for making the initiative to sign him, and then for head coach Terry Stotts to kind of get him into the lineup as quickly as he can. And I guess he has no choice because of all those injuries, but we'll have to see what happens with that. Could be interesting, could be bad, but we'll have to find out.
Could be cool to see if he takes advantage of a young and vulnerable Pelicans team.
8 p.m. Tune in.
And it will already be underway by the time this is online.
So maybe, if you hear this, you can see how it goes and relate it back. Do you have a prediction for his scoreline tonight?
I'd say high teens points.
I'm going to go 13 points in 20 minutes. 22 minutes. 13 points, 22 minutes.
I'll go 17 points.
Wow.
17 points. They'll get played a little bit more than people expect.
Right.
I'll say 24 minutes, 25 minutes.
Okay.
I think he'll pull down a handful of rebounds too.
All right.
Maybe 6 or 7 rebounds.
We'll have to see. I hope so. That would be awesome.
Looking forward to seeing Anthony back in the lineup, back in the league, and we'll see how long he stays around.
We're going to have to move on to what we've seen as a recent flurry of violent sports altercations that are beyond the scope of the game.
100%. First storyline that we want to touch upon comes from the NHL. Let's get right into it. Basically, a goal gets scored in the Washington Capitals and Anaheim Ducks game. Garrett Hathaway kind of in a scrum. There's a big tussle after the play's dead. A bunch of players from each team. He takes a sucker punch. He's not too happy. Eric Gudbranson from the Ducks is coming in to sort of help break things up, help mitigate. And Hathaway spits on Eric Gudbranson. And now he's scheduled for a hearing
tomorrow morning, I think.
Yeah, to sort of chat this one over. But I think, first of all, that's disgusting.
Yeah, well, for sure.
Getting spit on. And it's like, go and watch the video, because it's not like it hits him in, like, the belly. Like, it gets him in the face.
Right in the face.
Like,
a
it's
nice
gross.
thing of spit, too. No, it's just classless and it's stupid. I think that Eric Gudbranson definitely deserved a nice punch in the mouth, because while there's 2 Ducks players going after Hathaway at about the same time with refs trying to break it up, and it's just a classic sucker punch. But spitting is never going to be a part of the game. It's just stupid. Fighting is, and even if it's like a punch here and there, like, it's relatively harmless, but it's just so disrespectful and just awful and classless. I don't know.
Especially because it takes that level of intensity that typically comes from hockey. It takes that way too far. Like, there's already so much debate over allowing fighting in hockey,
right,
where you have 20,000 people in a building watching 2 people just square up and go at it until the refs deem the fight's over.
And the majority of the time, they have respect for each other, and after the fight, they go, nice fight or whatever, 100%. And they agree. A lot of the time, they're agreeing to fight, and so before the game even starts, or 5 minutes before they decide to have the fight. So it's part of the game, and no matter where you sit on the discussion of whether fighting should be in the game, it's part of the game, and it's in the rules of the game, and there's actually respect between a lot of the fighters. But you are literally spitting in the face of the other player.
And when you see that type of fighting, it's on even playing field.
Yeah.
Whereas spitting, nobody's ever expecting to get a big loogie in their face. And
Hathaway shouldn't have got sucker punched.
Yeah, and it's like, obviously there's a lot of emotions riding high. It's heat of the moment. Everything happens super quickly. I can see why he's frustrated.
I respect the intensity, but I don't respect
the action.
It reminds me of Brad Marchand, because Brad Marchand is one of those players that is a chippy little bastard, essentially. He was all over you. He's in your ear and whatever, but then at the same time, he can back it up with 100+ points in a season, and he's the worst. He's the worst. Like, you hate to play against that guy.
Yeah.
But and I can respect a player like that, because He's just getting in your head, and if you have the mental strength to get by it, then you do, and it's just a challenge, and that's just part of the game. But then it's when Brad Marchand starts slew-footing people that where it crosses the line, just like spitting on people crosses the line for intensity and trying to get your team going or trying to get somebody back. Slew-footing, spitting, anything like that should just be out of the game. It's just garbage.
I'm really interested to see what the repercussions are for Hathaway. We've kind of seen something like this in other sports.
Should be fine.
Definitely, I think there should be a monetary penalty.
Right.
I think that there should be some sort of leave without pay.
Yeah.
But, like, again...
Be interesting. Because then we also saw something similar to this in the Browns and Steelers game last week with Mason Rudolph and Myles Garrett. But that's a little bit different because that was just ridiculously violent.
Yeah. Talk us through that.
Yeah,
the
so
Steelers
if you aren't a football
Browns
fan, you still might have heard about it. But after the snap, Mason Rudolph, the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback, gets tackled. Doesn't like how Myles Garrett tackles him.
And he wrapped him.
He wrapped
for a
him
while after the play was dead.
And there could be a history there that we don't know about it. But then essentially what happened was what you can see is Myles Garrett rips off Mason Rudolph's helmet and bashes him over the head with it. And immediately two Steelers O-linemen essentially step in and throw him down and start punching and kicking him, which is understandable. And then there's this big debate about whether Myles Garrett was defending himself or not, because if there are some clips where people are seeing that it looks like where you can't see it, Mason Rudolph is like punching either below the belt or getting in like cheap shots. So it's like, okay, Myles Garrett should defend himself, but then ripping off the other person's helmet and bashing him over the head with it is incredibly extreme, especially with today's science and how we know how terrible concussions are.
And how hard those helmets are.
Yes.
Like, those helmets are designed to break contact.
Yeah.
Like, if that hits you over.
Yeah.
And it was, you can't really tell how hard it hit him. Hit Rudolph.
It looked like it was kind of the bottom of the helmet too. Like, I think he got away from that. It could have been a lot worse.
And you see him immediately. He's complaining right to the refs.
Yeah,
right away. It's like clearly he's not in a heap, passed out.
Yeah. So there's always going to be a debate about who started that and who deserves to be suspended. Myles Garrett is suspended indefinitely for the rest of the season. Mason Rudolph did not pursue legal action, which was smart on his part, because if he did, I'm sure there are like dozens of players around the league that would target him, because that's just like the unwritten rule of like, don't do that. And it's not like it was bad enough to actually sue him. It's not like it was the situation with Todd Bertuzzi way back when. Right?
Yeah, and like most of the time, especially in a sport like football, you see lots of times there are huge hits dealt. Mm-hmm. Guys stand up, give each other a pat on the butt, and away they go. But it's kind of the unwritten rule. What happens between the end zones, that's just part of the game.
Right.
Because it's such a physical game. And
interesting. It's interesting that happened with Hathaway the other day, and then last week that happened with Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph. But it's just, you hate to see that. You like to see the intensity in the game and the violence that naturally comes with it, obviously, and the excitement that comes along with it. But it's something that you don't want to see. So we'll have to see how those pan out. Yeah,
and it's kind of cool to not cool, but you want to compare it a little bit to some other situations we've seen. Obviously, he's cleaned up his act, and he's still known as one of the best soccer players in the world. But Suarez had a bit of a history of biting players.
He did. He has 2 bites.
And and
he's got again, 2 career bites.
That's an interesting way of taking out your frustration. But again, I truly believe that anything like that is heat of the moment.
Right.
And they would not do that if they were to have even 30 seconds to just reflect on the situation. Yeah. It's something, they're passionate, emotional athletes who they hate losing, which you need to have that mentality.
You don't want to see it in the game, but at the same time, it's like, okay, especially if they apologize or whatever, which Myles Garrett did. Yeah. And if there's no serious harm done, then it's like, okay, move past it, because they are just athletes and they are human and they make mistakes just like the rest of us. You hope it doesn't kind of happen. But
and hopefully it's not
it's happened in our minor soccer or minor athletic careers for both of us, just doing stupid things. So that's understandable, I guess.
Yeah.
But I guess the where the heat is this month is in the Toronto Maple Leafs kitchen.
100%. Babcock, it seems this is his 4th year with the team. It seems like he's finally getting the pieces to fall into place, the players that he needs to build this championship team.
Yeah.
Right now, it doesn't seem like he's really getting it done. Yeah, it's early season. The Leafs are currently sitting right at 500, 994, I believe.
10th.
They're not in a playoff spot. And it seems like, is Babcock really the man who's fit for the job? Or is he meant for a team that's more built like Detroit, a team that, he comes in, he doesn't need to do any of the rebuilding.
Right.
They're already a championship team.
People love the debate of how important the coach is. And I've always been critical about that debate, especially in European soccer, because people put a lot of weight on the coach. But in a situation like this, where 4 years you've been trying to get the right pieces and you've slowly been adding it, and people are finally falling into the right positions, and Kyle Dubas is working so hard to work around with the contracts and the cap space, and currently the Leafs can't afford to pay a $1 million backup goalie. So the fact that they've got it this close is great. It's like all the pieces are there for them, but they've lost 5 in a row, and they're 9-4 with a -6 goal differential. Something's happening there, and I know the goaltending sucks, and obviously they're trying to experiment with things, and Hutchinson's gone, and they took a gamble at the beginning of the season, but something's got to change for sure, especially because we're back below the Sabres, and every time we podcast, I talk about the Sabres in a really cruel way. So now I look like an idiot again.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you do.
Yeah, thanks. No, but it's just a matter of
back below the Sabres, and they have 2 games in hand.
Even though they've got injuries to Mitch Marner and Alex Kerfoot and John Tavares and Zach Hyman and Travis Dermott before that, the team's just way too talented, way too deep to be on the outside looking in. Like, they just are. They're getting blown out on the road. Like the Pittsburgh Penguins, that's not a team that should be giving you 5-goal loss.
No. It's
just not. No team with this roster should be getting a 5-goal loss.
Yeah.
In a perfect world, which it's not, but still, lots of, and maybe this is good for them. Maybe this is good for them because they're a team that does well during the regular season, and then when it comes, they can't get over the hump of the Boston Bruins or the first round playoff hump. So maybe they need to struggle now to find their true identity. Is that the problem too? John Tavares talked about that. It's a young team that is struggling to find their true identity. What do you think?
I think that the biggest problem for the Toronto Maple Leafs has been the leadership in the dressing room. And like you said, they have a young team, and with that, they lack a lot of maturity.
Right.
And I hate to say it so bluntly, and it's not like I'm bashing them by any means.
Bash them.
They're a talented team, but it seems like little things like early season when they were playing Montreal. I think it was the first weekend of the season, and they're up by a goal, and they're shorthanded. They end up breaking their stick, and they threw it at the player from the Habs, and that results in a penalty shot. They score a goal, and then the Habs go on to win it in a shootout. If they just keep their cool there's a pretty good chance that they don't give up that goal on the penalty shot.
Yeah.
They go on and win the game in regulation.
Lack of discipline,
it's,
you're right.
It's little things like that where you need to have the right mindset, and a sport like hockey, it's a long, grueling season. It's a marathon. You need to be mentally tough. And right now, that doesn't come from the coaches.
Right.
And
you're right.
Babcock, he's created championship teams.
Right.
We've seen the dynasty that he had in Detroit. He's coached the Canadian national team. Mm-hmm. He's a good coach, and he's in one of the most reputable sports franchises in Canada and North America because of his resume and because of what everybody knows he can do. I don't think that this should fall on Babcock's shoulders. I'll be disappointed with the Maple Leafs organization if they fire Babcock.
Okay.
Because how many times have you seen, it's very rare to see a coach get sacked in the NHL mid-season and that team to go on do anything special in the playoffs.
Right.
So I'll be disappointed if I see the Maple Leafs get rid of Babcock because he's there for a reason.
Right.
And they brought him in for a reason with a team that was in shambles, trying to find their identity, find themselves. Hey, the run that they've been on, it's frustrating losing to Boston in the playoffs, but that's a lot better than it was rewind 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. when they weren't even close to coming to the playoffs. 15 years ago, how long of a stretch did they go through without making the playoffs?
I was going to ask you, literally, if you're Kyle Dubas, do you fire him, or how long do you give him to get things back on track? They've got 2 regulation wins in the last 15 games, 2 regulation, and they're against San Jose and Los Angeles, which are the 2 worst teams in the Western Conference. And their calling card obviously used to be their explosive offense and their speed. There's 11 teams that are averaging more goals than them. Their power play is terrible. They don't hit. It's not like they can. Their team identity is just going to be like trying to be gritty. That's the opposite of what they want to do. So if they're not going to do that and they're not going to do that, then they can defend. They're not defending. They don't have a goalie who can make a stop. Like it's they don't make life difficult on anybody. They're soft. They fold too easily when they're down in games. Some games they're coming back. They could be that. First of all, they start too slowly, and then you see them. They're coming back. They got 1-2 goals, right? Empty netters even, and then mental errors just let the other team ice the game. There's just no ice in their veins. They don't want it. There's no hunger. So you're saying you don't fire Kyle Dubas, if you're Kyle Dubas, you don't fire Mike Babcock. Do you give him the rest of the season, or do you wait till January? And if they're still around the 500 mark, do you fire him then?
I would say, obviously an organization starts from the top down. I'm not taking that away.
Right.
I think that you have a good coach. Obviously there needs to be some sort of timeline, because if nothing changes, then there has to be some sort of change of scenery, and you can't just fire your entire team.
Right.
If it were me, obviously I'm no GM, I'm no expert, but I would say give him another 20 games till the midway point in the season.
Okay.
And if they're not in one of the top 3 spots in their division,
fire him and hope they pull the St. Louis Blues.
Yeah, I guess.
Except they had a goalie problem, and we got an everything problem. At least have an everything problem.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of it too is John Tavares. You've got to see a bit more from him. Yeah, it's only his second year with the squad, but he's the captain now, and he's the captain of the Leafs for a reason. He's got the experience, and he is one of those veteran presences on the team. There's a reason that they didn't just go and make Austin Matthews their captain.
Right.
They want someone who knows more than just what to do when they're on the ice. So
yeah, well, hopefully they can turn around, because they're wasting a 50-goal, 100-point season for Matthews. Tampa Bay's had almost as bad of a start as well, so it'd be cool to take advantage of that, since they are such a loaded team as well.
You see teams that were expected to be the big teams, you see them down a little bit.
It happens,
and it
happens.
Even in the West, you see there was a lot of hype around Calgary. And Calgary, no, they aren't out of contention. They're basically in the exact same situation that the Leafs are.
Yeah.
They're sitting right at 500. They're 5th in the Pacific Division. Not as great as they would like to, but hey, they're not out of reach, right? They're only a few wins behind climbing into a wild card spot.
Yeah,
they're right there.
It's early. It's really early. It is still only a quarter of the way through the season. I wouldn't say it's code red for the Leafs right now. I'd say firing them now would be a little bit silly. I think this team just needs to kind of figure out their identity still. So give them to January, or give them to around then. And then if things still aren't going their way, reset. And even if you don't think it's Mike Babcock's fault, maybe you need to just bring somebody in just to try and reset the culture and the identity, and just try something, because you can't have that.
Mm-hmm. And right now there's no sense to panic.
No.
Just manage.
Heat's on, but it is by no means code red, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of another big name in the sports world that was under a little bit of heat, moving over to the NCAA basketball world.
We love our NCAA basketball.
We got Kentucky. A week ago, we were recording this episode 2. What did I say? I said I think that Kentucky might go the rest of the season without losing a game.
Yeah.
Within a half hour of us posting our episode online, number 1 Kentucky loses at home to unranked Evansville.
Yeah.
The first time that anything like that had ever happened for Kentucky.
The Purple Aces. What a game.
And then even last night, Kentucky just scrapes by.
Yeah, I mean, and it was 82-74, but against the Utah Valley squad that you should be handling.
With 2 minutes left, it was a 1-point game.
Yeah, they have soul searching to do, because they lose that, they're dropping out of the top 15 next week for sure. And with the new AP poll out this week, they dropped 8 places to 9. Obviously, 3-1. Is that harsh? That's just how it works. If you're going to lose
No,
to
I
an
think
unranked team,
I think it's suited that they're still in the top 10. Obviously, they handled Michigan State.
Yeah,
They played
they're
very
a
well
good
against
team,
Michigan State early.
but they got to figure out. They're kind of like the Leafs right now with the identity issue, because it should not be that close against Utah Valley, and you should never be losing to Evansville, who actually this week has 43 votes to get into the top 25. So hopefully they can continue with
That'd be cool.
I'd love to see Evansville get into the
teams
top 25.
like Colorado.
Yeah.
Is in the top 25.
23. Look at them go.
Teams like that, VCU.
Yes, I was just about to say 21, VCU.
Yeah. Utah State is.
Utah State's having a season.
Yeah.
They're 5-0. They're having a season. That's awesome to see. And even seeing like Seton Hall, who is on and off, up at 13,
Pirates,
and they dropped one with like the Pirates with Miles Powell can be an absolute force come March as well.
Yeah. Tennessee cracks the poll for the first time this year. Obviously, a very good season.
Big win over Washington, actually, and there's 3. That game was played in Toronto this week, so that was pretty cool. And then Florida State with 91 votes to get into the top 25. They are starting to look more like the Florida State that we've seen in previous years. What happened to Florida? Where's Florida? They were still in this, I think, for the last podcast.
Florida, this is an interesting topic here. Florida, preseason ranked for the first time in a long time. I think 4 years maybe.
Yes.
The last time that they were ranked in the top 10 to start the season, I'm pretty sure was the year that they ended up winning the national championship in 06 maybe.
Could be right.
A while ago.
Could be right.
Anyway, they lose to Florida State. They drop down.
Which is not great, but Florida State is a reputable
they're a good
ACC program that can pull it up, and they look to be better than people thought.
And then, this past weekend, they lose to University of Connecticut.
Yeah.
That's
not the UConn team with Kemba Walker on it anymore. That is far from that team.
That we haven't seen in the tournament in a long time.
They're not receiving any top 25 votes. That is a terrible loss. And
as a result, in 2 weeks, this is the third poll of the season.
Yeah.
Week 3, we have see a team that started at 6, and they're not even in the top 25 anymore.
That's pretty crazy. That's got to be. I want somebody to pull up the record about how fast it takes a top 10 ranked team to get out of the top 25 poll, because that is crazy. They still have 67 votes, but I mean, if they better pick it back up. They really need to pick it back up.
I hope they do. And I hope they turn it around, because we mentioned it's been a while since Florida has had a good NCAA basketball team. Yeah. It'd be kind of cool to see maybe a rivalry game between Florida and Florida State in the tournament come March.
They're awesome. They're awesome. Any in-state rivalries are always fun. Ohio State's at 10, which is cool. They're up 6, and they're strong. And another cool fact is actually they're the only program that have 2 top 10
teams for 2 different sports.
Yeah.
You
so
look at
football is incredible. Obviously, always
they are killing it.
Yeah, so
they're still undefeated in the football realm. And you look at them. They cracked the top 10, up 6 places. They beat Villanova. A big matchup, especially Villanova. They want to keep. They've had some success the last few years. A couple national championships in the last 4 seasons or so. So that's a big win for Ohio State. A couple other notables. We saw Louisville leapfrog Michigan State, even though Michigan State had a good week and didn't lose. And they've settled in nicely into the 2 spot. Duke with the loss from Kentucky is first overall, rounding up the top 5. Michigan State in 3rd, Kansas in 4th. North Carolina has only been climbing, and they round out the top 5 in 5th position. What do you think of those top 5 teams? How they look, how sustainable this top 5 will be? Because right now, Michigan State and Kansas, their only losses were coming to Kentucky and Duke, respectively.
Be interesting to see.
Do you think that this top 5 is here to stick around for a while?
It's just so early. You never really know. North Carolina, they'll go as far as Cole Anthony takes them. They really don't have any pieces to lose. If they lose a piece, it could mean a lot of problems. They're not super deep this year. No. And then Michigan and Kansas are both good, but we're seeing what happens at Kentucky, obviously, right? Kentucky had a fantastic game against Michigan State, and then they went down. But kudos to Michigan State for, bouncing back after that. loss at the beginning of the season and still going well, especially with Cassius Winston and his little brother passing away. And the MSU faithful is completely behind him, and he's a great player, and so that's
he's a class act.
And he's a class act.
It really sucks seeing something like that happen. But it was kind of a heartwarming moment. The first game that he played after his brother passed away, his first shot of the game, he knocks a triple down for.
And they beat Seton Hall, who's a very good team.
Yes.
Despite Miles Powell's 37 points. So I can see it staying relatively the same, at least for the next couple of weeks until we get into conference play, because that's when it starts getting heated up with Duke, Louisville, and UNC obviously all being in the ACC. That's going to be exciting. And then Virginia's right behind there at 7. So 4 teams in the ACC that are that high. Somebody that is I really want to watch, obviously, especially come March, is Vermont. That could be a very good mid-major team, as well as Marquette. Those teams are always sticking around there, so definitely keep your eyes peeled for how that goes. Michigan is obviously having a bit of a rebuild season, but they're still on the outside looking into that top 25. I don't think they'll ever get there just because they're not deep enough and they don't have that star power, but that's another team that you never know, especially with the proper coaching and later on in the season. They could really find who they are and make a good run.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun time of year with the college football wrapping up, college basketball getting underway. Just a comment, you mentioned North Carolina not very deep this year. The same could be said about a few of these teams who are in the top 25. You know, Louisville, there's a lot of weight on Jordan Nwora.
Yes,
what Louisville does well is they play really, really good defense. And same with Duke. Duke, if they were to lose one or two of their players, this is probably one of the teams that they've had in the past few years that they rotate through more guys. But they had a tough game this past weekend against a weaker opponent, and if it weren't for Trey Jones dropping a season or career high 31 points, they are not winning that game, and they're pretty fortunate to be in the number 1 spot in the country, in my opinion.
It's early, and we're gonna just have to see how it goes. But as always, it's gonna be a fantastic season, and we love our weekly check-ins for college basketball. Most exciting time of the year.
100%. That's all we got.
I think that is it. Yeah.
But thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all you faithful checking us out
and emailing us. We've had a lot of emails recently, so keep that going.
Yeah. Well, maybe next show we'll read off some of the emails we've been getting.
For sure. Sounds good. That's all. I'm Lucas. That's Luke.
I'm Luke. Take care, guys.
Have a good one.